Riving knives. Let's talk about riving knives because I've lost count of the amount of times people have commented on my videos, other than calling me Jack Black. But anyway, commented on my videos talking about kickback. Oh, I'd be more worried about kickback if I was you. You've got no riving knife. And I'll say to you, okay, I'm going to make a video. So that's what I'm going to do. I want to talk about riving knives. I have talked about riving knives to some extent before, but let's see if I can explain to you what the riving knife is, what it does, and things to watch out for with a riving knife. Because the riving knife on your saw might be blooming useless anyway, okay? People don't seem to have an understanding of how the riving knife works, what it's actually for. Now, I'll tell you now, when using a saw without a riving knife or with a riving knife, the riving knife makes very little difference when cutting small pieces of wood. The reason for the riving knife is really for ripping long pieces of wood. Now let's say, for instance, this piece of wood was new, okay? I hadn't cut it down the middle, and I was about to cut it down the middle. Right? So what's going to happen is I'll be releasing tension in the wood, okay? And the wood's going to want to go somewhere. Now, you might have had the situation before. You cut a piece of wood, you've just trued it, you cut it, and all of a sudden your bit of wood's bent after you cut it. Well, that's because you released the tension, okay? It's a bit like, no, don't go there. There's another channel. So it's like you're releasing the tension in the wood, and the wood can go two ways. It'll either go like that, away from the saw blade, or it will go towards the saw blade and pinch up down the side of the saw blade. That is fundamentally what you use a riving knife for. Years ago, and actually not that long ago, a lot of saws didn't have riving knives, and especially here in France, for instance, they would use a wedge, okay? So you're passing the piece of wood for the saw, you're making your cut, what have you, and as you go through, you put a wedge, yeah? You don't try and split it, but you just a little wedge in there. And what that'll do is take the tension, the pressure away from the sides of the saw blade. And as you move along, you'd move your wedge up, or you just have a whole load of them and you just keep shoving them in. You don't need every saw, you go around it, obviously, you don't need every blade. And you're passing your piece of wood through, and the tension's off the blade, and you've got no risk of kickback. Now, I always say to you, even if you have a riving knife, wedges are still a blooming good idea. Because lots of riving knives on lots of saws, they're not compatible with the saw blades. Especially on cheaper saws, and even some more expensive saws, the riving knives are useless. I think they're absolutely useless. They're not doing anything. Now, small bits of wood, when you're passing them through, a riving knife is going to do nothing at all. You're going to say to me, oh, what about kickback? The riving knife will stop. They won't. Because the riving knife should be thinner than the kerf of the saw. So the actual saw blade, the teeth of the blade, is still touching your piece of wood, so potentially you can still get kickback. You see? When it throws a piece of wood back at you, okay? It can also still lift the piece of wood back at you. All right? The best thing you can do to prevent any injury is stand to one side of your saw blade, not directly face in line with the saw blade or your hands in line with the saw blade. Have some room around the saw blade. Use push sticks whenever you can. 2 push sticks if you want against the, one pushing against the fence, one's pushing down the side of the actual saw. Do what I do as well. Maybe you get push sticks, put a little brass screw in the end. And that could also help prevent injury because you're not tempted to put your hands over the saw to move the pieces of wood out of the way. You've got a little grip on the end and you can move the bit of wood around like that. And your hand is clear of the blade unless you've got a whopper great flipping blade. You see? It's just common sense. But what are the fundamental things you need to watch out for with your riving knife? Okay? Now, there's 2 saw blades here. This one here is a CMT thin curve saw blade. This one here is a 80-tooth Mecabois saw. It's a French blade, saw blade. And this blade is a lot thicker. Now, let's say, for instance, I was using this blade in this saw, which I can do. Okay? Same ball, absolutely not a problem. Right? The riving knife, if the riving knife was for this blade, which it probably wouldn't be, right? Wouldn't be suitable for this saw blade. No. So it means you need multiple riving knives, whatever saw blade you're using, because they're all different thickness, different curves, you see. This one here, okay, the actual blade itself, the body of the blade, okay, is about 1.8 millimetres. That's the thickness of the body of the blade. It's a thin curved blade. And the curve of the blade is, which is the width of the thickness of the teeth, is 2.2 millimetres. Right, so what size riving knife should I have with this saw blade? Well, it needs to be anything between 1.8 millimetres and 2.2. So if you had a 2 millimetre one, let's say, for instance, I put this at 2 millimetres. Okay, I'm going to set that at 2 millimetres, all right, my verniers here. And it'll pass, the saw blade body will pass through the slot happily, but the actual teeth, won't pass through that slot. No, as you can see, I'm moving it backwards and forwards. Now, what that means is you're taking pressure off the sides of the blade, but the teeth can still make its cut. So you're not trying to force the wood apart. You don't want the riving knife and the same thickness of the kerf, and you don't want it thinner than the actual body of the blade. So let's say, for instance, you've got your riving knife in this saw and it's only 2mm thick, and then I come along and install this blade, this Misnomer, or any standard blade. You know, just a universal blade is going to be thicker than this thin kerf blade. So then I come along, my verniers, what have you. Let's have a look at this one then. And this particular one is, the body of the blade is literally 2mm. Okay, so that means that riving knife I'd have for this blade would be the same thickness as this saw blade. That's not correct. No, it's not going to actually do its job. It's not going to prevent the pressure and the squeeze on the side of the blade. It's still going to squeeze the blade. Especially you get built sawdust and stuff like that, it will still grip your wood and throw it back at you. Okay, so that would need to be between that and the actual kerf. And the kerf on this saw is 3.2mm as written on the side of the blade. Yes, 3.2mm. So really, on this particular one, if you had anything between 2.2 to 1.8mm riving knife, that would be absolutely fine. So for those of you who keep telling me about my riving knife, that I haven't got one, do you really understand the difference between one riving knife and another, and one saw blade and another? I've got my doubts. Just because it's fit to the saw doesn't mean to say it's any good for the job that you're using it for. No. Is that it? It does get frustrated in YouTube, It does sometimes, But I do appreciate, and I have to admit, I do appreciate constructive comments, your ideas, because one comment on a previous video I made, which somebody mentioned about making different riving knives that I could install in this machine, I think is an absolutely brilliant idea. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create like a bayonet system. So the 2 bolt holes in this saw, they're the original riving knife, which is attached to flipping guard to as well, because it's higher than the saw blade, absolutely ridiculous. If I make a bayonet system that can bolt to the original riving knife assembly, for which I can then just slot in with a pin or peg or a bolt or single bolt or something simple, well then that's what I'm going to do. And I'll make my riving knives at, guess what? Old saw blades. Like for instance, the body of the saw blade here would be ideal for a riving knife for this saw blade here. But I'm not cutting that one up. No, that'd be an old one. Anyway, please beat the old like button, maybe subscribe to the channel, because then you'll get a warm fuzzy feeling in your pocket every time I upload another video. And I hope you'd be excited about that. Oh, blimey. It's such a controversial thing. Oh, cracky stuff. It almost gets political, it does. Oh, dear me. If you don't like it, write a letter.